Okay, good morning. I'm discussing constructivism, Nirmal. But constructivism is a modern educational philosophy and learning theory which states that learners actively construct their own knowledge based on peer experience, social interactions, and reflection. Learning is not the passive transfer of facts from teachers to students, rather, it is an active student-centered and meaning-making process. Constructivism is strongly associated with educational thinkers such as Piaget, Vygotsky, John Dewey, and Brunner. Knowledge is constructed by learners as they attempt to make sense of their experience. Constructivism as an assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation refers to the process of taking new information and fitting it into a existing schema. Accommodation. Accommodation refers to using newly acquired information to revise and redevelop an existing schema. Basic assumptions of constructivism. Knowledge is constructed, not transmitted. Learners bring prior knowledge, beliefs, and experience to the classroom. Learning occurs through active participation, exploration, and problem solving. Social interaction plays a crucial role in building meaning. Teachers act as facilitators, not authoritative knowledge givers. According to Jean Piaget, cognitive constructivism, children learn by interacting with the environment. Concept of assimilation, accommodation, and equilibration emphasize individual discovery learning. Vygotsky social constructivism, knowledge is constructed through cultural tools and social interaction. Introduce zone of proximal development (ZPD) and scaffolding. John Dewey, learning through experience and problem solving. Education should relate to real life situations. Jerome Brunner, discovery learning and spiral curriculum. Importance of categorization and structure of knowledge. Characteristics of constructivist classroom. Learner-centered environment. Active learning through experiments, inquiry, projects, collaborative learning, group work, discussions, use of real-life, meaningful tasks, teacher as a guide, mentor, and facilitator, continuous formative assessment, portfolios, presentations, observations, encouragement of critical and creative thinking, role of teacher, facilitate learning rather than lecture, provide scaffolding and guidance when necessary, create problem solving and inquiry-based tasks, encourage questioning, reflection, and dialogue, connect new knowledge with students' prior experience. Role of students: actively participate in learning, ask questions, explore, reflect, collaborate, construct meaning through the experience, take responsibility for their own learning. Advantage of constructivism: promotes deep understanding, not rote memorization, enhance problem solving and critical thinking skills, encourage creativity and independent thinking, increases students' motivation and engagement, supports lifelong learning skills. Limitations requires well-trained teachers, time-consuming and resource-intensive. Large class size may limit interaction. Assessment can be subjective. Constructivism shifts education from teacher-centered to learner-centered approach. It focuses on meaning-making, active learning, and the development of critical and reflective thinkers. For modern education, including higher education, constructivism provides a powerful and reflective framework that aligns with lifelong learning and real-world problem-solving skills. Difference between traditional and constructivist classroom. In case of traditional classroom, curriculum begins with the parts of the whole emphasize basic skills. Curriculum emphasize big concepts beginning with the whole and expanding to include the parts. Strict adherence to the fixed curriculum is highly valued, but in case of constructive classroom, pursuit of student questions and interest is valued. Materials are primarily textbooks and workbooks. Materials include primary source of materials and manipulative materials. Learning is based on repetition. In case of traditional classroom, learning is interactive, building on what the students already knows. Teachers disseminate information to students. Students are recipient of knowledge. Teachers have a dialogue with students, helping students construct their own knowledge. Teachers' role is directive, rooted in authority, but in case of constructive classroom, teachers' roles is interactive, rooted in negotiation. Assessment is through testing and correct answers. Assessment includes student works, observation, and point of view as well as test. Processes are important of product. Knowledge is seen as inert in case of traditional classroom. Knowledge seen as a dynamic, ever changing with our experience. Student work primarily alone. Student works primarily in groups. An essential component to constructive teaching provoke prior knowledge. New knowledge is created in relation to learners' pre-existing knowledge, create cognitive dissonance, assign problems and activities that will challenge students. Knowledge is built as learners encounter novel problems and revise existing schemas as they walk through the challenging problem. Apply knowledge with feedback. Encourage students to evaluate new information and modify existing knowledge. Apply knowledge with feedback. Reflect on learning. Provide students with an opportunity to show themselves what they have learned. Activities might include presentation, reflexive papers, or creating step-by-step tutorial for another students to work their prior knowledge, cognitive dissonance, Applied knowledge with feedback. Constructive classroom, big concept, student question, primary data source, student as thinker, teacher as mediators. A constructivist classroom is a learning environment where students actively construct knowledge based on their experience, prior understanding, and interaction with others. Learning is seen as an active, student centered process rather than a passive reception of information. The teacher acts as facilitator, guide, and co learner, helping students build deeper understanding through exploration and reflection. Learner centered environment, students take an active role in learning. Individual differences, peer knowledge, and interests are valued. Active learning, students learn by doing, exploring, experimenting, discussing, solving problems, and reflecting. Activities include projects, inquiry-based tasks, experiments, group discussion, and hands-on work. Collaborative and social learning. Students work in groups, pairs, or teams. Social interaction helps them refine and reconstruct knowledge. Teachers as a facilitator. Teacher guides students instead of giving direct answers. Help students ask questions, think critically, and find solution. Use of real-life context. Learning tasks are connected with real-world situation. Students understand why what they are learning is meaningful. Scaffolding. Teachers provide support when needed and gradually withdraws as students become independent learners. Continuous assessment uses formative assessment, observation, portfolios, presentation, self-assessment. Focus is on learning progress, not only final results. Classroom practice in a constructive classroom, asking open-ended questions, group work and cooperative learning, case studies, role play simulations, hands-on experiments, discovery learning, use of concept maps, project-based learning, peer knowledge, activation, reflection journals, student-led discussion and presentation. Role of teacher, encourage curiosity and inquiry, create problem-solving tasks, facilitate discussion, not dominate it, provide scaffolding when students struggle, connect new knowledge with students' prior understanding, promote critical and creative thinking. Role of students, engage actively in learning activities, collaborate and communicate, ask questions, explore ideas, and test solutions. Reflect on learning, construct meaning based on experiences. Advantage, develops critical thinking and reasoning, encourage creativity and problem solving, increases motivation and engagement, promotes deep understanding rather than rote memorization, builds communication and teamwork skills, enhance independent and lifelong learning skills. Challenge requires more planning, resource, and time. Large class size may limit group work. A student used to rote learning may initially struggle. Assessment can be subjective. Teachers need proper training. Example of constructive classroom activities. Reciprocal teaching learning allow pairs of students to teach each other. Inquiry-based learning, learners pose their own question and seek the answer to their question by resource and direct observation. Problem-based learning, learners acquire knowledge by devising a solution to a problem. Cooperative learning, students work together in small groups to maximize their own and each other's learning. Main theories: Vygotsky, John Dewey, Brunner, Piaget. Characteristic of constructivist pedagogy: shared knowledge between teachers and students, shared authority between teachers and students. Teacher acts as a guide or facilitator. Learning groups consist of small numbers of students. Universal design for learning provide multiple means for engagement, provide multiple means for representation, provide multiple means for action and expression. Universal designs for learning provide multiple means for engagement, provide multiple means for representation, provide multiple means for action and expression. Engagement, representation, action and expression. Scaffolding. Scaffolding is teaching strategy where the teachers provides temporary support to help students learn a new concept or skill. As students become more capable, the teacher gradually removes the support, allowing them to perform the task independently. Teachers provide step-by-step help, hints, cues, or examples. Support is temporary and removed as learning improves. Helps students learn tasks they cannot be alone. Based on Vygotsky, Zone of Proximal Development, ZPD, builds confidence, independence, and deeper understanding. Zone of Proximal Development. The zone of proximal development proposed by Vygotsky, what the learner can do independently and what the learner can do with help from a teacher or a more capable peer. It represents the idea loading zone where the instruction is most effective. Scaffolding begins with the social constructs. Zone of proximal development, knowledge, what I can learn on my own, what can learn with the help. Technology and tools, knowledge orders, beyond my reach. निर्माणवाद एक आधुनिक शैक्षिक दर्शन र शिक्षण सिकाइ सिद्धान्त हो जस अनुसार विद्यार्थीहरूले ज्ञानलाई आफै निर्माण गर्छन्। बाहिरी रूपमा शिक्षकले दिएको जानकारीलाई केवल ग्रहण मात्र गर्दैनन्, विद्यार्थीका पहिलाका अनुभव, सामाजिक सहकार्य र वातावरणसँगको अन्तर्क्रिया तथा आत्मचिन्तनले सिकाइ सम्पन्न हुन्छ। यो सिद्धान्तका प्रमुख सार्थकहरूमा पियाजे, vygotsky, डिबे र ब्रुनर पर्छन्। निर्माणवादका मुख्य मान्यताहरू ज्ञान निर्माण हुन्छ, विद्यार्थीका पूर्व अनुभव, विश्वास र पृष्ठभूमि सिकाइको आधार हुन्छ। सिकाइ सक्रिय, समस्यामूलक र सहभागितामूलक प्रक्रियाबाट हुन्छ। सामाजिक अन्तर्क्रियाले अर्थ निर्माणमा महत्त्वपूर्ण भूमिका खेल्छ। शिक्षक सहजीकरण गर्ने व्यक्ति हुन्छ। जीएन प्याजी संज्ञानात्मक निर्माणवाद, कन्स्ट्रक्टिभिज कग्निटिभ कन्स्ट्रक्टिभिजम, वातावरणसँगको अन्तर्क्रिया मार्फत सिकाइ, समायोजन, एकोमोडेसन, आत्मसात, एसिमिलेसन, सन्तुलन, इक्विलिब्रियमको सिद्धान्त हुन्छ। व्यक्तिगत खोजमा आधारित सिकाइ हुन्छ। भिगोत्स्की सोसल कन्स्ट्रक्टिभिजम, सामाजिक निर्माणवाद, ज्ञान सामाजिक, सांस्कृतिक र भाषिक माध्यमबाट निर्माण हुन्छ। निकट विकास क्षेत्र, जेपिडी र सहारा स्क्याफोल्डिङको अवधारणा छ। जोन डिबीका अनुसार अनुभव, समस्या समाधान र कार्यमा आधारित सिकाइ विद्यालय जीवन, वास्तविक जीवनसँग जोडिनुपर्छ। अनुभव, समस्या र समाधान र कार्यमा आधारित सिकाइ हो, विद्यालय जीवन र वास्तविक जीवनसँग जोडिनुपर्छ। जेरोम ब्रुनर खोजमा आधारित सिकाइ हो, स्पाइरल पाठ्यक्रम हुन्छ, ज्ञानको संरचना बुझ्नुपर्नेमा जोड दिएको हुन्छ। निर्माणवादी कक्षा, कन्स्ट्रक्टिभिस्ट क्लासरुमका विशेषताहरू, विद्यार्थी केन्द्रित, सिकाइ वातावरण, प्रयोग, अनुसन्धान, प्रोजेक्ट, समूह कार्य जस्ता, सक्रिय सिकाइ, सहकार्यात्मक शिक्षण सिकाइ, कोलाबोरेटिभ लर्निङ, वास्तविक जीवनसँग सम्बन्धित गतिविधिहरू, शिक्षक, मार्गदर्शक र सहयोगीको भूमिकामा हुन्छ। निरन्तर प्रारम्भिक मूल्याङ्कन, फर्मेटिभ एसेसमेन्ट, आलोचनात्मक र सृजनात्मक सोचको विकास, शिक्षकको भूमिका निर्देशन होइन, सहजीकरण गर्नुपर्छ, कठिन कार्यहरूमा सहारा प्रदान गर्नुपर्छ, समस्यामा आधारित कार्यहरू सिर्जना गर्नुपर्छ, विद्यार्थीलाई प्रश्न सोध्न, छलफल गर्न, विचार गर्न प्रेरित गर्नुपर्छ, नयाँ ज्ञानलाई पहिलाका अनुभवसँग जोडिनुपर्छ। विद्यार्थीको भूमिका, सक्रिय रूपमा सिकाइमा संलग्न हुनुपर्छ, प्रश्न सोध्नु, समूहमा कार्य गर्नु, अनुभवबाट अर्थ निर्माण गर्नु, सिकाइको जिम्मेवारी स्वयं लिनु हो, आत्ममूल्याङ्कन र प्रतिबिम्बन गर्नु। निर्माणवादका केही फाइदाहरू छन्। रतान्मुखी सिकाइभन्दा गहिरो बुझाइ विकास हुन्छ। समस्या समाधान र आलोचनात्मक सोच कौशलको विकास हुन्छ। सृजनात्मकता र स्वतन्त्र सोचलाई प्रोत्साहन, विद्यार्थीको रुचि, प्रेरणा र सहभागिता बढ्छ। दीर्घकालीन र जीवनीति सिकाइ कौशलमा विकास हुन्छ। मर्यादाहरू, शिक्षकले उच्च क्षमता र प्रशिक्षण आवश्यक पर्छ। समय र स्रोतको बढी लाग्छ। ठुलो कक्षा आकाशमा लागू गर्न कठिन हुन्छ। मूल्याङ्कन कहिलेकाहीँ मात्र व्यक्तिपरक हुन सक्छ। निर्माणवादले शिक्षण सिकाइलाई विद्यार्थी केन्द्रित, सक्रिय, अर्थपूर्ण र जीवन उन्मुख बनाउँछ। यसले विद्यार्थीलाई केवल ज्ञानको भण्डार नभई आलोचनात्मक, स्वतन्त्र, सृजनशील र समस्या समाधान क्षमता भएको व्यक्ति बनाउँदै आधुनिक शिक्षाको उद्देश्य पुरा गर्छ। We have chosen to use the term worldview as meaning of basic set of beliefs of guide actions. Others have called term paradigms. We prefer the worldview because it brings a global perspective to research in this era of international interconnection. We see worldwide as a general philosophical orientation about the world and nature of resource that a researcher brings to a study. Individuals develop worldviews based on their discipline orientations and resource communities. Advisors and mentors, past resource experience and cultural experience, individual resources based on these factors will often lead to embracing a strong quantitative, qualitative, or mixed method approach in their resource. The philosophical beliefs are important to include in a study because a reader can best interpret the research, knowing that biases and the particular stance being taken by the researcher. We recognize that in the quantitative resource, the position of the researcher remains largely hidden and not expressed. Still, we feel that it needs to be presented in the open for readers to interpret or study. Although there is the ongoing debate about what worldviews or beliefs researchers bring to inquiry, we will highlight four widely discussed in the literature: post-positivism, constructivism, transformative, and pragmatism. The major elements of each position: post-positivism, determination; constructivism, understanding; reductionism, multiple participant meanings; empirical observation and measurement; social and historical construction; theory verification, theory generation. Transformative and pragmatism, political consequence of actions, power and justice oriented, problem centered, collaborative, pluralistic, change oriented, real world practice oriented. The post-positivist worldview, post-positive worldviews have represented the traditional form of resource, and these assumptions hold true more for quantitative resource than qualitative resource. This worldview is sometimes called scientific method or doing science research. It is also called positivist, post-positivist research, empirical science, and post-positivism. This last term is called post-positivism because it represents the thinking after post-positivism, challenging the traditional notion of the absolute truth of knowledge and recognizing that we cannot be certain about our claims of knowledge when studying the behavior and actions of humans. The post-positivist tradition comes from 19th century writers such as Comte and more others, and more recently from writers such as Flaves. These who hold a post-positivist worldview hold a deterministic philosophy that cause probably determine effect or outcomes. Thus, the problems studied by post-positivists reflect the need to identify and assess the causes that influence outcomes, such as those found in experiments. It is also reductionistic in that the intent is to reduce the ideas into a small, discrete set to test, such as the variables that comprise hypotheses and research questions. Careful observation and measurement of the objective reality or that is in the world represent a post-positivist lens, thus developing numeric Measures of observations and studying the behavior of individual become permanent for post-positivists. Finally, laws or theories govern the world, and these theories need to be tested, verified, and refined so that we can understand the world. Thus, in the scientific method, the accepted approach to research by post-positivists or researcher begins with a theory. Collect data that either supports or defeats the theory and makes the necessary revision and conducts additional tests. In reading Phillips and Barval's, you can gain a sense of the key assumption of this position. Knowledge is conjectural and anti-foundational. Absolute truth can never be found. Thus, evidence established in research is always imperfect and fallible. For this reason, researcher states that they dare not prove a hypothesis. Instead, they indicate a failure to reject the hypothesis. Research is the process of making claims and then refining or abandoning some of them for others claims more strongly warranted. Most quantitative research, for example, starts with the test of theory. Data evidence and rational consideration shape knowledge in the practice. The researcher collects information on instruments based on measures completed by the participants or by observations recorded by researcher. Research seeks to develop relevant true statements that explain the situation of concern or that describe the causal relationships of interest. The quantitative studies researcher advance the relationship among variables and pose these as questions or hypotheses. Being objective is an essential aspect of competent inquiry. Researcher must examine the methods and conclusions or bias. For example, in standard of validity and reliability are important in quantitative research. The constructive worldview others holds a different worldview, a constructive or social constructivist worldview, often combined with the interpretivism. As a philosophical position used in the quantitative research, the ideas came from the social construction of reality, naturalistic inquiry, among others also those who hold the constructivist worldview believes that individuals seek understanding of the world in which they have and work. Individuals develop subjective meanings of their experience, meanings directed towards certain objects or things. These meanings are varied and multiple, leading the resources to look for the complexity of views rather than narrowing the meanings into a few categories, or ideas. The goal of research relies as much as possible on the participants' views of the situation. The questions become broad and general so that the participants can construct the meaning of a situation, typically words and discussion or interactions with other persons. The more open-ended the questioning, the better, because the researcher listens carefully so that people said or do in their life setting. Often these subjective meanings are negotiated socially and historically. They are not simply imprinted on individuals but are formed through the interaction with others in social constructivism and through the historical and cultural norms that operate in individuals' lives. Thus, constructivist research often address the process of interaction among individuals. They also focus on specific contexts in which people live and work to understand the historical and cultural settings of the participants. Researchers recognize that their own backgrounds shape their interpretation and they position themselves in the resource to acknowledge how their interpretations flow from their personal, cultural, and historical experience. The researcher intent is to make the sense of interpret the meanings others have about the world rather than starting with the theory. Inquiries generate or inductively develop or is a theory or pattern of meaning. For example, in discussing the constructivism, humans beings construct the meaning as they engage with the world. They interpreting the qualitative resources tend to use the open-ended questions so that the participants can share their views. Humans engage their world and make sense of it based on their historical and social perspectives are all born into a world of meaning bestowed upon us by our culture. Thus, qualitative resources seek to understand their constants or setting of participants through the visiting these conflicts and gathering the information personally. They also interpret what define an interpretation shaped by the researcher's own experience and background. The basic generation of meaning is always social, arising in and out of interaction with a human community. The process of qualitative resource is largely inductive. The inquirer generates meaning from the data collected in the field. The transformative worldview, another group of researchers, holds to the philosophical assumptions of the transformative approach. From individuals who felt that the post-positivist assumptions impose structural laws and theories that did not fit marginalized individuals in our society or issues of power and social justice, discrimination and oppression. There is no uniform body of literature characterizing this worldview, but it includes groups of researchers that are critical theories, participatory action researcher, community-based participatory researcher, Marxist, feminist, and racial and ethnic memory. It also includes the persons with disabilities, indigenous, and post-colonial peoples, and members of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, and queer communities. Historically, the transformative writers have drawn on works. Additional authors writing about the perspectives. In the main, this inquires feels the constructivist stance did not go far enough in advocating for actions agenda to help the marginalized people or transformative worldview rules the resource inquiry needs to be intervened with politics and a political change agenda to confront social oppression at whatever levels it occurs. Thus, the resource contains an action agenda for reform that may change the lives of the participants, the institution in which the individuals or life and the resources life. Moreover, resources need to address specific important social issues of the day, issues such as empowerment, inequality, oppression, domination, suppression, and alienation. The research often begins with one of these issues as the focal points of the study. This research also assumes that the inquirer will proceed collaboratively, do not further marginalize the participants as a result of the inquiry. In this sense, the participants may help design questions, collect data, analyze information, or reap the rewards of the resource. Transformative resource provides a voice for these participants rising there. So, some MCQ, constructivism, वस्तुगत बौद्ध निर्माणवाद. Constructivism primarily views learning as active knowledge construction, who is considered the father of cognitive constructivism, Piaget. Social constructivism is mainly associated with Vygotsky. According to Piaget, learning occurs through assimilation and accommodation. Zone of proximal development was proposed by Vygotsky. Scaffolding, temporary support to learner. Constructivist classrooms are student-centered. Which of the following is not a feature of constructivism? Active learning, collaborative learning, inquiry-based learning are the features of constructivism, but rote memorization is not feature of the constructivism. Discovery learning is promoted by Brunner. Did we emphasize learning by doing? Knowledge is constructed by learners in the core idea of constructivism. In constructivism, teachers act as facilitator, which term is closely related to Vygotsky theory, zone of proximal development, ZPD. Spiral curriculum is associated with Brunner. Constructivism supports active participation, which is a characteristic of a constructive classroom. The student tends work collaboratively. Meaningful learning is emphasized by constructivist cognitive conflict promotes learning according to Piaget. Cognitive conflict promotes learning according to Piaget. Social interaction is important in the theory of Vygotsky. Constructivism opposes lecture method but supports inquiry, collaboration, reflection. Learners bring to the learning environment prior knowledge. Constructivism was influenced by pragmatism, which method aligns with constructivism. Group discussion. ZPD stands for Zone of Proximal Development. In constructivism, eros considered natural part of learning. Learning is situated in context means learning is context dependent. Which strategy is constructivist? Brainstorming. Knowledge is constructed in constructivism. Constructivism focuses on the learner's engagement. We emphasize the cognitive development stage Piaget. According to Vygotsky, language is a cultural tool. Problem-based learning is part of constructivism. Peer learning is important in the social constructivism. Constructivism encourages cooperation. Schema theories relate to Piaget. Learning by discovery is part of Brunner's constructivist method. Lecture. Constructivism views learners are active participants. Reflection journals are used in the constructivist classroom. Learning through experience is emphasized by John Dewey. The teacher's primary role is to facilitate learning. Knowledge construction happens through interaction. Constructivism promotes higher order thinking, which concept is not linked to constructivism. Reinforcement, JPD, zone of proximal development, scaffolding, discovery learning are concept of constructivism. Learning is an active process. Constructivism emphasizes understanding. Clear knowledge of students is considered the foundation of new learning. Constructivism supports two-way communication. The classroom environment should be flexible. Constructivism prefers students for real life problem solving. निर्माणवाद अनुसार सिकाइ के हो? सक्रिय रूपमा ज्ञान निर्माण गर्ने प्रक्रिया हो। संज्ञानात्मक निर्माणवादका प्रमुख प्रवर्तक पियाजे हुन्। सामाजिक निर्माणवाद भिगोट्स्कीले प्रस्ताव गरेका थिए। पियाजेका अनुसार सिकाइ आत्मसात र समायोजन, एसिमिलेसन र एकोमोडेसनबाट हुन्छ। जेपीडीको अवधारणा भिगोट्स्कीले ल्याएका हुन्। स्काफोल्डिङ भनेको अस्थायी सहयोग हो, टेम्पोररी सपोर्ट हो। निर्माणवादी कक्षा विद्यार्थी केन्द्रित, स्टुडेन्ट सेन्टर हुनुपर्छ। रटानमुखी सिकाइ निर्माणवादको विशेषता होइन। सक्रिय सिकाइ, एक्टिभ लर्निङ, समूह कार्य, ग्रुप वर्क, अन्वेषण, डिस्कभरी चाहिँ निर्माणवादका विशेषता हुन्। खोज आधारित सिकाइ ब्रुनरले जोड दिएका थिए। दिवेले गरेर सिकिन्छ, लर्निङ बाइ डुइङ भनेका थिए। ज्ञान विद्यार्थी आफैले निर्माण गर्छ भन्ने विचार निर्माणवादले जोड दिएको छ। निर्माणवादमा शिक्षकको भूमिका भनेको सहजीकरण, फेसिलिटेटर मात्र हो। भिगोट्स्कीको सिद्धान्तसँग जोन अफ प्रोक्सिमल डेभलपमेन्ट जोडिन्छ। स्पाइरल पाठ्यक्रमका प्रवर्तक ब्रुनर हुन्। निर्माणवादले सक्रिय सहभागितालाई समर्थन गर्छ। निर्माणवादी कक्षा विद्यार्थीले सहकार्य गर्छन्। निर्माणवादी दृष्टिकोणले अर्थपूर्ण सिकाइलाई महत्त्व दिन्छ। संज्ञानात्मक द्वन्द्व, कग्निटिभ कन्फ्लिक्ट पियाजेको सिद्धान्त हो। सामाजिक अन्तर्क्रिया भिगोट्स्कीको महत्त्वपूर्ण छ, सिद्धान्तमा छ। निर्माणवादले व्याख्यान विधि, लेक्चर मेथडलाई विरोध गर्छ। ओरिजिन अफ प्रोजेक्ट कोड, ग्रुप डिस्कसन एन्ड डिस्कभरी मेथडलाई यसले आत्मसात गर्छ। विद्यार्थीको पूर्ण ज्ञानको निर्माणवादले सिकाइको आधार हो। निर्माणवाद कसको प्रभावमा विकसित भयो? प्राग्मेटिज्म निर्माणवादी विधि समूह छलफल हो। जेपीडी जोन अफ प्रोक्सिमल डेभलपमेन्ट निर्माणवादमा सिकाइको प्रकृति अङ्ग। निर्माणवादमा गल्ती केलाई मानिन्छ? सिकाइको प्रकृतिको अङ्ग। प्रसङ्ग आधारित सिकाइ, सिचुएटेड लर्निङ सिकाइ प्रसङ्गमा निर्भर हुन्छ। निम्नमध्ये कुन निर्माणवादी रणनीति हो? ब्रेनस्टोर्मिङ निर्माणवादमा ज्ञान स्वयं निर्माण गरिन्छ। निर्माणवादले विद्यार्थी सहभागितामा जोड दिन्छ। संज्ञानात्मक विकास पियाजेले भिगोट्स्कीका अनुसार सांस्कृतिक उपकरण हो। भाषा प्रब्लम बेस्ड लर्निङ निर्माणवाद सिद्धान्तसँग मेल खान्छ। पियर लर्निङ सामाजिक निर्माणवाद महत्त्वपूर्ण छ। निम्नमध्ये कुन निर्माणवादी विधि होइन? व्याख्यान विधि निर्माणवादमा विद्यार्थी सक्रिय सहभागी हुन्छ। रिफ्लेक्सन जर्नल कुन कक्षामा पढेको हुन्छ? निर्माणवादमा अनुभव मार्फत सिकाइ कसको विचार हो? डिबे शिक्षकको मुख्य भूमिका सहजीकरण गर्नु हो। ज्ञान निर्माण कसरी हुन्छ? अन्तर्क्रिया मार्फत हुन्छ। निर्माणवादले केमा जोड दिन्छ? उच्च स्तरीय सोच कुन अवधारणा निर्माणवादसँग जोडिँदैन? सुदृढीकरण, जेपिटी स्काफोल्डिङ, खोजमा आधारित विधायी चुनिन्छ। सिकाइ सक्रिय प्रक्रिया हो। निर्माणवादले कसमा जोड दिन्छ? बुझाइमा। विद्यार्थीको पूर्व ज्ञान नयाँ सिकाइको आधार। निर्माणवादले के चाहन्छ? दुईतर्फी संवाद। कक्षा वातावरण कस्तो हुनुपर्छ? लचिलो। निर्माणवादी सिकाइले विद्यार्थीलाई कसको लागि तयार पार्छ? वास्तविक जीवनका समस्याको समाधान। यो थियो constructivism, निर्माणवाद. Thanks for watching and request you all like, comment, share and subscribe. Thank you for patience. Let's know. Bye bye. See you again.